All right, Jennifer Adighije, MD/CEO, Niger Delta Power Holding Company, joins us tonight to look at issues around the power sector. Glad to have you, Janice.
Thank you very much.
The power sector has been an intractable, and Nigeria has not had it real good. But let's even talk about what's happening in Avia. After 3 years of total, what caused the total shutdown for 3 years?
Thank you very much for having me. As a matter of fact, the power plant was safely shut down when we began to experience some huge disparities, in the figures being reported, between the points of supply of gas and the receiving point. So it was essentially, we had to detect that there was a fault with the gas supply line. And so when I came on board, I came up with a recovery plan. And, we very quickly began to address the defects on the gas supply line. And then, but then again, the huge disparities cost us a lot of accumulation of debts with the gas supplier, Total Energies. So we're able to defray all the accumulated debt. And then they've also been able to restore supply to the plant now that the defective works have been carried out, all the remedial works have been carried out on the line. And then we also had some minor electromechanical issues, on the back end, on the turbine end, which we worked with the OEM, General Electric, to resolve those issues. So the good news is that, yes, the Alaoji Power Plant is back on. We have 3 mechanically available units there now, which amount to about 375 megawatts that is mechanically available and readily dispatchable to the grid. And just to correct the reporter who reported the story, our power plants are actually grid-tied. And so what that means is that the energy that we generate is exported to the grid and, can be transported.
The national grid?
Yes, to the national grid, and can be transported all over the country. So it's not, the power plant is not to serve Abia State or the Niger Delta region. It's actually to serve Nigeria. So this is a remarkable feat, not just for NDPHC, but for the power supply value chain and for the country.
To what extent is it remarkable in terms of supplying power to the rest of, because you're extending it, it's not just about Abia or Delta region,
Absolutely.
but across the entire.
Yes, absolutely.
So to what extent is it remarkable in the sense that the report says now Abia State, the region will begin to have light and then the entire nation? Because you see, I have always, this issue of, well, we've passed there, but to still talk about it, the band A, band B, band C thing is discrimination. That's how I have always seen it, because Nigerians across the board should be able to have light wherever you live, regardless, instead of the band A. So how remarkable is that impact across?
As a matter of fact, like I said, this is now 375 megawatts readily available and readily dispatchable. And so what that means to an extent is that we've added to the power generation capacity, nationally, we've added 375 megawatts. So, and if the available generation as at date, sits at a little below 10,000, but what we're able to dispatch daily, sits at about 4,500 megawatts. And so that is instructive of the fact that there are gaps. And, the gaps are primarily around, evacuation corridors, wheeling corridors. And, this is also the role that NDPHC plays for the sector, because we're an interventionist agency with a mandate that cuts across. So we carry out and we bridge infrastructure gaps across the entire gas to electricity ecosystem. So we have a number of projects as well in transmission. We have a number of projects supporting the discos to scale electricity to ensure that we can deliver to the last mile. So 375 out of 4,500 megawatts is quite significant. So that's why I said, it's a remarkable achievement for us that we're able to add and we're able to increase, the available power generation.
2 questions. You talked about debts. Have you been able to settle those debts that are accumulated? I think you talked about it.
Well,
one. And then secondly, there's also talk about, help us understand or help me understand, a commercialization aspect of it. I don't get it soon, because I'm reading here that the plant is now being positioned for commercialization.
Okay. So what that means, so every power plant right? The performance of a power plant is primarily measured by two factors. One is the plant availability factor, and the second factor is the load factor. So a plant availability factor is determined by your mechanical performance, like what we have done now in restoring 375 megawatts. However, to optimize the performance of the plant, right? Every energy that you generate has to be off-taken. So that's the commercialization bit. And where we're focusing so much on commercialization now and collaboration with the state governments is because the Electricity Act now empowers the state to participate fully in the electricity business, in power generation, in distribution. And so we're working with state governments now, to come up with a mechanism for securing that power supply value chain in their domains, sort of in a way that, we can ring fence an area and ensure that we deliver uninterruptible electricity to that area, with the backing of the state government. And, when we have customers, dedicated customers that are buying electricity and paying for electricity at the cost reflective tariff, we're also able to back those transactions up with firm gas supply agreements and firm power purchase agreements. And, that's the way the entire value chain is optimized.
Before I let you go, briefly, I started by saying this is intractable, seemingly intractable. You're in the power sector.
Absolutely.
And you got in here. When can Nigerians ever say that we can see light 24/7 of the day? What is the greatest challenge that this sector has?
I would say historically, so there were historical issues. And I would say that historically, the sector had been underfunded and underinvested. And this is where I'm going to give a lot of credit to Mr. President. Because when Mr. President came on board, he insisted on passing the Electricity Act. And what that did is it decentralized and liberalized the market. And then also with the application of the Band A, because historically, the energy that we consumed wasn't cost reflective. And so what that means is that we gas power generation companies were not able to recover our costs on the electricity that we were generating. So, but with the introduction of the Band A tariff, and by the way, the Band A customers are only 15% of the market, the sector liquidity went up by 70% from 1 trillion. As of today, the sector liquidity is above 3 trillion a year. And so what that did for us, it's given us more liquidity and more cash flow to be able to procure more gas, to be able to back our operations and maintenance. And so, you can't expect us to perform optimally if we're not funded optimally. That's the truth.
All right, we're going to sit here. That's all the time we have. I could argue so many things with you, but we'll leave it here. The Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of NDPHC, Jennifer Adighije. Thank you for being on Newsnight.
Thank you very much.